Hey, for this week's Notes from a Slow Coach, I want to talk about one of the characteristic traits of sensory processing sensitivity or environmental sensitivity, which is being sensitive to subtleties. It's the kind of thing where you might notice fine details and slight changes other people around you might miss. But it's not just about spotting details, it's more like having a kind of attuned radar running in the background, quietly scanning, picking up faint signals and patterns between the lines and beneath the surface. And it's not that you're actively looking for patterns, they just emerge and appear. Maybe that's true for you too. You might notice how maybe a friend's face changes whenever a certain topic comes up in conversation, or how two unrelated news stories seem to echo one another in some kind of way that you might not be able to quite put your finger on, or how history has a way of repeating itself but wearing slightly different costumes when it does and making it look like there's this novel event or this unique thing that is happening, but it's like, this has similar echoes to something else. Something catches your attention for reasons you might not be able to explain at first. There's like a cross reference in your mind that you can feel, but you can't quite grasp yet. And making sense of it can take an unpredictable length of time. And this is where I think it's helpful to talk about the difference between conceptual and experimental ways of thinking or approaching creativity and innovation, which is an idea explored by David Gallinson in his pioneering study of the creative life cycle. More naturally conceptual thinkers start with the end goal and work backwards, kind of mapping the route to get to the specific destination that they have identified as where they want to get to. And then more experimental thinkers, and I suspect many highly sensitive people fall into this group, move forwards without a crystal clear idea of where it is that they are trying to get. Letting success and purpose and meaning kind of emerge along the way iteratively as each step is followed and the next one comes from that previous one. So if the question, where do you see yourself in 5 years' time, feels like an impossible one to answer, it might not be because you aren't letting yourself dream effectively. It might be because your natural approach to meaning making is more fluid and iterative. In other words, a 5 year plan is more of a prison than a map for you. We explored a parallel idea last week in our August phrase maze when we started digging for treasure around the saying, it's the thought that counts. We were kind of considering how a thought can become a path to follow, and that if we give it space, the shape of that path slowly reveals itself through our lives. The modern world is doing all it can to eradicate thinking time, isn't it? And in many cases, the need to think altogether. But without that space, you just kind of get that first flash, a dot or two, but you never find out what could connect those dots and what dots are waiting beyond those dots if we allow our imaginations to wander. I remember this from group projects at school. One of the frustrations that I always had with group work was by the time that I started kind of sensing deeper patterns in what we were doing, the destination had already been decided. The work would be done often in the most kind of obvious first thought way, which is fine if you're then iterating and experimenting. But that was rarely the case. Who has the time for meandering creativity and open exploration in that kind of context? But that frustration, I guess, taught me something that I still see now, that without time, so many potential connections aren't made. And for me, again and again through life, the most rewarding projects and creations and discoveries have been those where I can't see exactly where I'm going from the outset, but I can see the trail of becoming when I look at where I've got to. The elements of me left inside that trail, inside that kind of journey. The changes in direction from realizations and epiphanies along the way and from following curiosities. And that can be sort of construed as a flakiness through a conceptual mind. It's like, well, I thought you were trying to get to here and you've gone off in this direction. But actually, through that experimental approach, you realize, no, that's part of that state of becoming, that kind of journey of getting to where it is that you are going. And I was thinking about these distinctions recently when listening to Richard Osman talking on the Rest Is Entertainment podcast. And he was talking about the AI made film Midnight Drop. And he was speaking about some of the predictions that within a couple of years, most social media videos and adverts and trailers and even whole movies are going to be largely AI assisted, if not fully AI generated, to the point where you could have an idea at breakfast and then have that idea turned into something and published after lunch. It's a fair prediction, I think, based on where we are right now. And, it feels like the direction that we're heading, the trajectory that we're on. But it raises an interesting question about the role of time in the creative process for me. For an algorithm, this happens instantly. It's scanning the vast data set that it's working from and produces a finished product based on the prompt that you give it. For humans, pattern recognition is slower and arguably stranger. We connect ideas that seem completely disconnected and unrelated if we have time to do so. We notice shapes that don't necessarily exist in any database. They are not algorithmic. We let those connections change us, and that in turn morphs the way that we are seeing things. But that kind of recognition needs more than just clock time. It needs meandering time, the kind where ideas are able to bump into one another, shift form, create unexpected bridges, and become things that you could never preconceive at the outset. Sometimes the only way to reach the road you need to get to is to take what might appear to be a wrong direction or an inefficient turn at first. And even in retrospect, when viewed through a conceptual lens, it might be judged as a failed attempt to eventually get to where you needed to go. It's like, well, you needed to take those false turns or go down those dead ends so that you'd eventually see the right way that you needed to go. But through the experimental lens, it's not a wrong turn at all. It's actually part of the route. It's what takes you to where you need to get, because that is where these things bump against one another, and you find the path coming through the messiness and the chaos of that road that you're on, and that's all part of it. And I wonder if a shift towards pace-based outcomes can actually limit our potential. Could it even send us into a regressive spiral? And might this change the trajectory that we're currently predicting? Coming back to that idea that within 2 years or however long it's going to be, all of these things are going to be AI generated. Could we actually eventually crave ways to pull human creativity back out of all of this, to slow down, to think, to innovate outside of the boxes again? Because I don't know about you, but I'm not seeing the potential for a more beautiful world in these current predictions. Even from those who are touting the benefits of this current technological revolution, I'm seeing walls closing in, people becoming more atomized, people becoming more isolated, retreating into smaller worlds. And yeah, okay, quick turnaround AI productions might have value to some degree, but if everybody's making them, who's watching them? And why? What's the point? Pause for a moment and imagine the scale of taking these shortcuts. If everybody's doing them, where do you end up? Just everyone shouting into the void, or prompting AI to shout into the void and then hoping that there's an AI bot to listen. It's more noise. It's more wondering why nobody has the ability to listen to one another. When you take a conceptual approach, you start with the precise aim. AI designed to help you reach the destination quickly and directly. When it knows, okay, this is what you want, yeah, let's set that destination, and let's get there in the quickest way possible. But experimental work, experimental approaches to life are different. The meaning emerges through the wrong turns, the odd triggers, the quiet echoes between unrelated events. The final piece often looks nothing like the seed that started it. And that unpredictability is part of what makes it what it is. This way of working depends on recognizing patterns, allowing patterns to emerge over time. Noticing how an image from one project resonates with a conversation that we might have weeks later. Seeing that a theme in a particular song mirrors something that we've noticed in news or a story from 50 years ago. Noticing those quiet echoes between seemingly unrelated events. For these to emerge in the way that they do, they can't be programmed because they rely on time, on openness, on curiosity, on just prodding and poking and allowing things to germinate and meander and wander. And this is why I'm drawn to a slow coaching approach as well. It's why I think speed-led coaching can miss something essential at times. It doesn't leave space for those deeper connections to form. I work slowly on purpose. We'll have live calls, asynchronous back and forth, and a reflective shared journal where we can write and reflect. And I think change needs time to land, to be seeded, to germinate, to grow. And efficiency models absolutely help when you know exactly what it is that you want. And in many of those cases, actually, an AI coach is going to be able to walk you through those steps. Something like the GROW model can be effectively done by AI. We're definitely seeing more of that. But the thing that can emerge when you're working long-term with a human, you might notice that what you think you want isn't actually yours. Maybe it's inherited or borrowed or amplified by the loudest values in the world around us, maybe from other people or society in general. With the wrong coaching approach for the needs and desires that you have, you might move further away from what truly matters to you, what it is that you're actually looking for support with. And that coaching just helps you get to the wrong place faster. But there is nuance here. We're taught to believe in a steady path of progress towards sort of a final wholeness or completeness, or a healed state of being, a perpetual horizon that keeps receding, keeps moving further and further away. Because in reality, we are shaped by difference and contradiction. Evolution is not moving towards a tidy endpoint. It's not like we're working towards this place where finally you will be whole and complete. It's actually a messy, emergent conversation over time which recedes and proceeds, and it has no final destination, no point of completion. In experimental approaches, the destination doesn't stand apart from the path. The route that you take changes what the goal becomes, and the goal reshapes the route as you're going. It's in circles, in cycles, in seasons, detours that reveal the road. And slowing down makes room for that reciprocity between the path and the destination. It helps you notice patterns in your thinking, in your choices, in your desires, before you kind of crystallize them into these mini targets that you might be aiming for along the way. It's not a passive waiting, it's a deliberate action that invites reflection and learning. Iteration, reiteration, growth, character, and meaning emerge through our relationship with life as it is, not by marching towards a perfect horizon that can never arrive because it doesn't exist. Speed obviously has its place, but if we try to fit human pattern recognition into the breakfast idea, lunch, launch mold, we lose something really important here. For those of us sensitive to subtleties, space is not wasted time. And without this, the dots might stay scattered or limited, restricted. The loops keep repeating, the walls close in, and our horizons lower, causing us to miss those richer patterns that are waiting to be found, to take us in more meaningful directions. So maybe the question isn't how fast can I get this done, but what could be made possible if I give this more time? Without that space to meander, we can become exhausted, drained. Do you recognize yourself in that experimental or conceptual lens? I'd absolutely love to hear from you on this, and do like this video and subscribe to the channel if you want to receive future notes from a slow coach like this one. All right, take care. Bye-bye.